Hello everybody, welcome back to the workshop. Got a quick little video here. I have this chotered up tote from a Frankenplane bit of a number 5 Stanley Bailey hand plane, and here you can see some of the video I have of the before, and this is the video of the after, and I'll give you a quick overview of what I did to get it to look like this. So let's get into it. So I've got 3 videos planned in the series. The first one I just do a simple deep dive, and in this video I'm going to focus on restoring the knob in the tote, and the other video is the full refurbishment of the plane to turn it into an old looking but well cared for user. Well, I have something very unusual here that I'd like to share. This is actually what's known as a two-piece tote, and I'm going to try to catch the seam here. But if you look along there very carefully, you can see that there's a bit of a finger joint seam between the upper and lower halves of the tote as I'm holding it, particularly apparent here. But this joint goes all the way across the tote, these grooves, and if I turn it over, you can see that it's on this side as well. And apparently this was a Stanley manufacturing technique for a while. It's theorized as to why they did it. Common theory is they probably wanted to just use scraps of rosewood that were a little too thin to turn into a tote. Apparently they had this manufacturing technique of laminating wood together, producing a very strong joint, and they used it in other parts of their product line, particularly the levels. It looks like they also used it in the totes in certain circumstances. So this is a real unusual little piece of history here. So this joint, unfortunately, is pretty mediocre, and if I flex it a little bit, you can kind of see I can open the joint here. So I don't think it's particularly well bonded in this area. However, on this side, it seems pretty tight, and generally the whole back area here seems pretty tight. I was thinking I might try to soak this. If it's a water-soluble glue, then perhaps I can loosen it a little bit and get this apart without doing any more damage, but it's complicated by the fact that this is a two-piece tote and this is glued together. And on the tote, I wrapped it, got a little water in there as I flex it. So I kept working this, and I'm not sure it's showing up well, but it's loose. The top and bottom halves seem to be not glued at all. I think they're being held in place by these two nails. This looks like glue residue, and there's the nail. Looks like these nails were galvanized, which added quite a bit of grip. So I spent about an hour cleaning up these two halves. I used a dental pick. Doesn't seem to key very well. I also tried to stick toothpicks in the holes, and much to my chagrin, two halves don't line up very well. So I also used some length of little bits of Romex copper, skinnier than a toothpick, and I found that even those put in here tended to hold the two halves not in alignment. So unfortunately, I don't think those are going to be able to be helped. Maybe later on when I get the thing glued up, I'll be able to take advantage of those holes. I think there's remnants of a finish on the tote, and I'm gonna just try to remove it with either a little lacquer thinner or acetone, just to get a better look at what the wood is underneath. I don't want to be thrown off by colors or something, and there seems to be in some areas a little bit of schmutz of some sort. Several years ago I did a video repairing this tote, and I think I did a pretty good job disguising that joint. And the technique I use, I have these pieces of mahogany that I stained, rosewood color stain, and I think the color match is pretty good. So what I'm going to do is take some teeny pieces of wood and glue it around the perimeter of each side like I did before. And I do that because then when you go to glue it together, it helps fill that joint and fills it with wood. So, you know, it'll take stain, it'll take finish, just like the real wood does. And I'm gonna say, not really looking forward to it. It was an awful lot of work, but I cannot argue with the result. So I came up with a technique to try to get shavings off of this piece of wood. I don't know what the species is, but it's very dark and very dense. And when I typically try to hand plane it, I get these little tiny crumbs of shavings, if you will. And they're not quite what I'm looking for. So what I do is I have a damp cloth and an iron, and I just kind of steam it for a couple minutes. I think the heat and the water hopefully soften the fibers a little bit. And that's all steam coming up, not smoke. get that out of the way. It's still hot, and I have this set for a heavy shaving, and that's much better. Those are much longer and intact than I've typically been able to get. Here's an update on where I stand so far. I've kind of got this seam pretty well filled in everywhere. And I also tried something different. I'm gluing in a couple miscellaneous pieces of slivers of wood into that part of the horn where a good chunk was taken out. And I'm slowly building it out. I think you can see there's a couple pieces in there that are a little lighter. And I've got a couple other pieces glued in there that are a little darker. And it's a pretty tedious process. The goal is to have a joint that's nice and tight without the need of future wood filler. Got a little bit more to go in there, but that's not terribly visible. I discovered the drill bit doesn't go all the way through. Stanley, when they made these, they drilled from the top and then they flipped it over and drilled from the bottom, so you don't necessarily get perfect alignment. But another thought I had was I could put these two together and sort of key it up like so, and I was thinking that would have to work. Unfortunately, that's not really lining up as good as I can get it. For some reason, I'm not sure why, they're not perfectly aligned. And I also looked at these three holes that were drilled in the bottom, and they don't seem to line up very well either. So I think what I'm relegated to doing is I'm going to use a slow setting epoxy and just make gosh darn sure that they're aligned well visually. And you can see around the perimeter I've glued in very thin strips of dark wood, and you can see them like that, and it's looking pretty good. Not perfect, but once that's glued together we'll be able to dress up that joint a little more. And I also started gluing in some thin strips of wood along this part of the horn that had a chunk taken out of it, kind of getting to the point it's getting a little more smooth. I'm going to use a little bit of black. Definitely not going to need a lot of adhesive. And to tint such a small amount, typically just need the tiniest dab on the end of the mixing stick. In this case, it's a toothpick. And you can see what was once clear is now pretty dark brown. In fact, that actually is a similar color to the rosewood, which is fine. Just going to put a thin coat. I'm going to try not to get in any of the holes. Don't want to get it too close to the edge. Okay, there it is, all clamped up, looking pretty good. And now I just have to set it aside for quite a number of hours. Come by tomorrow, see how we did. Okay, I've had to do a little bit of sanding around the joint. I can still feel the joint when I rub my finger across it. Can't really see it, but I can feel that there's a discontinuity. Sanded this a little bit heavier, and you can see I've removed the patina. So looks like this is going to have a bit of refinish in its future. Okay, so here's where we're at the moment, and it feels good and it's looking good. On this side you can see the seam is actually a little lighter than the wood immediately around it. I'm going to have to try to see if I can darken just that line a little bit. And up here you can see the seam is a little darker, so got a little bit of touching up to do. I'm not sure how much better I'm going to get it. I took to some steel wool on the finish to try to balance it out a little bit. I'm trying hard not to get the dents and divots removed. My goal is to try to get it smooth enough where I can keep gluing on some thin strips of really dark wood, and then I'll be able to shape it a little bit better, just to fill in that little bite taken out of the horn. Right on the edge there, I've built it out maybe a millimeter and a half, and you can see I've got a flat out here that's curving into this overall piece. Been doing it by gluing on one sliver of wood at a time, trying to build it out. And as I go along, I add dark stain to the wood to soak into a little bit of the fibers, so that in general it's a little bit more homogeneous, as a darker color. And what I've been doing is I've been gluing short pieces back here, and as I fill in the wedge, the pieces get longer and longer. So right now I've got a piece that's reaching about that far under the horn. The next piece might go, I don't know, a millimeter or so beyond that one. And every time I glue it on, I try to sand it flat to get a new face. I've got a sliver of wood here, just a shaving, and I'm going to try to glue it somewhere around there. I'm using ordinary PVA wood glue that's got some dye in it, because it all has to be dark. And the technique is carefully put a coat of glue on it and it's pretty flat, so I don't need to get it terribly thick. Fill in any gaps here. And you take the piece of wood, line it up where you want it, and I'm trying to get the grain to be parallel with that of the tote. And once you get it where you want it, I clamp it with my fingers, as I need kind of clamping pressure that has to conform a little bit to the imperfect surface. So I'll hold it like this for a minute or two, and that will allow the glue to tack up. And I'm not going to make you sit here and watch that. Okay, so here it is glued in place. Now what I'm going to very carefully do is use an X-Acto knife to ever so gently try to shave the wood away as close to the contour as I can get. Then I have some 100 grit sandpaper that I very carefully kind of use as a file to shape it. Okay, and there it is with that little piece groomed and fitted. I had to very gently sand the area where it goes in so we have a smooth transition. And I shaped it. Another trick I pull is occasionally I put a little dollop of shellac on a given area where there seem to be some voids, and then I will sand it and let a little bit of the sanding dust mix with the shellac to gently fill the voids. I think the shellac will take a little bit of stain going forwards. With the 3 holes drilled in the bottom, I can stick a toothpick up into 2 of them and have it reach beyond the seam to reinforce that joint a little bit. So it seems like low-hanging fruit. I already did that particular hole. I was able to get pretty far up into the back, and that's probably the most critical part of the joint. Okay, I think I'm kind of done with the knob here. I got that filled in right there. I got my thumb on the 2 little chips that have been filled in, and if you look closely you can see that there's wood grain in there, and I think the color is a reasonable match. And as I turn it around, I don't think that's terribly noticeable. Again, if you look at it under good light and magnification, you might suspect it's a patch, but looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to put this in the category of done and ready to move on. Well, and here is the knob out in the daylight. If I look carefully, right in there is the repair that I effected. I think it looks pretty good. I don't think anybody's going to look at that and say, oh goodness, look at that. So that's good. A little bit of a check in there right by my thumb, but that's okay. Came out really nice. And here is the tote finished. And it's not perfect, but I think the repair is pretty close to invisible. Of course, I know what I'm looking for. It's right there, a little divot. And you can carefully see the line going across, but if you don't know what you're looking for, it just might be faked out a little bit. And again, the goal is you just want it to look like as invisible a repair as you can get it. And up here in the horn, you can see that's been filled in. It doesn't look perfect. It looks like it's been chowdered a little bit, which I think is okay. I didn't want to make it look brand new. Well, and that's all I got for this one. These 2 pieces came out really nice, and I can't wait to get them back on the plane. Don't forget to check out the other videos in this series. On the first one, I just did a deep dive to show you what the plane looked like when I first got it, and then I did a refurbishing video where I souped it up and cleaned it up and made it look like a nice, old, well cared for tool. Check them out. Anyway, as always, as I like to say, thanks for stopping by. Stay safe, take care, keep your eyes out for the next one.